Okay, welcome to the 24th episode of An Evolving Man. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking to Laurence Johns. Laurence is from the Mankind Project, and he's the Development and Outreach Director for the UK and Ireland branch. The MKP is a men's charity that helps to nurture a global community of men who have the strength of character to show love, support healthy relationships, and make the world a kinder place. Welcome, Laurence.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Piers.
Pleasure. So I first came across Laurence. We first met, I think it was 2017, on a Mankind Project weekend, and I did the initiation, the weekend, the main weekend in 2016, and I just found it so powerful. And I wanted to kind of really speak to you today about masculinity, about initiation. To begin, I'd really love you to speak a little bit about your own journey and what drew you into men's work, please, Laurence.
It's quite a funny story, actually, because I came to men's work I kind of thought I was going to it for all the wrong reasons. Right. It was when was it? It was 2002. And, on the surface, things were going okay. I was 27. I was quite young when I got involved in the Mankind Project. For men that get involved in a Mankind Project, that's statistically quite young. And things on the surface, you probably would have thought things were going okay. I was working for a guy. He was the biggest rare book antiquarian book dealer in England at the time. And I was director of that. I was 27 years old, director of the company, flying all around the world doing book fairs and having a great old time. But there was like an element that was coming in of I was drinking way too much. There was far too much drugs going on. There was all sorts of stuff going on, and really I was unraveling. And there's been periods in my life where I've headed towards destruction, and I was definitely heading towards destruction. And it came to a head when I was in my boss's office, and he came in, and it was early morning. I'd been up all night, and I was in the office doing not extra work, put it that way. And luckily for me, this guy was I kind of knew at the time that he was involved in the Mankind Project, and I saw the people coming around, and they seemed all kind of huggy, and it seemed a little bit culty to me, I have to say, from the outside. And he said, "Listen, there's this weekend, right? I think you need to go and do it." And I thought I'd been called into the office to be fired, So this thing of going off on this weekend seemed like a good deal, like compared to being fired. And it kind of put it to me a way that I couldn't refuse. He said, "Listen, I'll pay for you to go. If you go and you think it's terrible, then nothing lost for you. Like, if it has not benefited, nothing lost for you." He said, "But if you go and you come back and you say it was magnificent, then we'll work out how you pay me back." Because it's 2002, it was £500 then. That was a lot of money. That was a lot of money in 2002. And I went off on it for all the wrong reasons. I went off thinking, looks a little bit culty, probably quite good being in a cult with my boss, like all of those sort of magician-y stuff was playing in my mind. And I thought, what's it going to be? It's going to be like a bit of a sort of, I had a sort of hippie sort of health club in my mind. I think I really didn't know what I was going into. And what I say, without saying what happens on the weekend, is like, there was a moment where I looked around this room, and I saw masculinity in a different way than I'd ever seen it before. I grew up, my background was, my dad was a professional criminal, so a gangster really. And that was the world that I grew up in. And that world is like hierarchy on meth. It's just like, there is no play, there are no jokes, it's all jostling for power, it's all microaggressions to kind of create where you are. and safety is only at the top. And if you're at the bottom, it's a miserable place to be. And so my understanding of masculinity had been that it was hierarchy, and safety was at the top. Like, you had to be a top boy, otherwise you were going to be a victim. And I looked around this room, and that was turned on its head. I saw a situation where the more vulnerable you were, the stronger you seemed. And it was acknowledged as bravery, like, wow, you could show that to us. Like, and from that moment, it completely rewired my brain. You know, it completely rewired my brain, because I was like, I came away from there going, wait, actually, my strength is in exposing myself rather than hiding myself. Like, if I go, here I am, warts and all, right? These are my imperfections. I'm aware of them. You can't hurt me because I'm in touch with them.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with them. That was a revelation to me. And actually, like, I can be invested in your life. You can be invested in my life. And that doesn't mean weakness. That means strength, because we're together, we're supporting each other. It completely changed my experience. And just to say, probably a good note to say here now, because there will be people watching this who go, the Mankind Project looks a little bit culty.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, like, it looks like that from the outside, because there's elements in it that it's like a movie. Like, we just don't want to tell you the movie. It's not because it's secret, or it's not because it's so weird that you can't know about it. It's just because you have to come across it as a surprise to get it. So it's very hard for us to show everyone what we do. But yeah, we are not a cult. We don't have anyone who's making a big load of money from this. Like, our accounts are visible to every member of what we do. There's no one at the top taking piles of money. There's no one at the top with a load of control. It's all diffused down to community level. The content was largely given away by the founders to those communities. So we really ain't a cult, but we have to keep an element of mystique, really, because I think on a fundamental level, for men to go into a situation with a large group of other men where they don't know exactly everything that's going to happen, and they have to trust, it's part of an initiatory process of going into the unknown. If it's no longer unknown, it's not an initiatory process. It's not a, it doesn't have, you know, and when I talk about initiation, I talk about in the way Robert Moore talks about initiation, like any point where anything you go through where there's an element of discomfort and danger, and you're going to have to give something up to pick something up, is an initiatory process. So when I talk about initiation, I talk about it in the terms of an experience where you might have to lose something to gain something.
Thank you. As you're speaking, it really reminds me of my own initiation, and I'd love to come back to this maybe later on, this idea that there's lots of initiations in the world at the moment, but I think Robert Moore, I've heard in one of his talks, he talks about we need 3 stages for initiation to work. One is some form of threshold moment or a challenge. The second one is a safe space, and third one is an elder. And I feel often we get the first one, but we don't get the elder. We don't have the safe space.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really good to come back to this. My personal theory is that, you know, I'm often asked about what's toxic masculinity and stuff like that. I know we're going to cover that later, but like, and the other question is masculinity in crisis? Like, is masculinity in crisis? My view is masculinity is going through an initiatory process right now. You know, I think that's what's happening. I think we're at the threshold, and we're being asked the question, like, what are you willing to give up in order to get something different? Are you willing to give up the power that you have? Are you willing to give up the privilege you have? Are you actually really willing to give up all that to get what you want, to get more connection, to get more happiness? Because you can't have your cake and eat it. And I think we're being asked what we're going to give up. and get something new that's better for everyone.
Mm.
And it's really interesting what you said about those 3 stages, because where's the safe spaces in that? Where's the safe space to do that? Where's the elders?
Yeah.
Where are the older men showing up to go to initiate the younger men? I mean, it's happening, and I'm glad to say within the Mankind Project, for example, there's a very active elder community, so it's happening. But on a global scale, they're interesting questions to look at, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe that's something I'd love to come back to about eldership. About, I spoke to Simon Hinckley, episode 12, about how we cultivate eldership. Because I just see this real dearth of, well, where are the elders? I didn't really have anyone to speak to as a kid. Who do I look up to? It's just someone 1 year older than me. That was my elder.
Yeah. Or it was like, like my initiations into masculinity were definitely around scenes, really.
Mm.
There were little weird things, like I was into skateboarding. So it was like, you spent the first 3 years skateboarding being the guy at the side who everyone said, get the fuck out of my way. It's a very different scene to what it is now. It's an Olympic sport now, but it wasn't then. Or you spent the first 2 years going into the skateboard shop and no one even acknowledging you, even though you wanted to buy something, and then a couple of years later you were sitting on the desk, on the counter with your feet up watching skateboard videos. That was the initiation. It weren't like, they weren't even elders, they were the same age, but it was just acceptance from a group that had been in a scene or around a situation longer than you, that knew the rules. And I think the issue we may have with eldership is, who knows what the rules are to be able to initiate anyone into that now, because that line has been broken so many times through history, through various woundings.
Thank you, Laurence. So I'd love to come into the second question more about the MKP. So you're the Development Outreach Director for the Mankind Project. Would you be able to share a little bit more about their mission and what it does? Because I think what I really loved about the Mankind Project is we have the weekend where we go off, but what I've loved is you've then got Journeyman, you've then got the other organizations which have sprung out from these inspired men. So I'd love you to share.
Yeah, I mean, the one you talked about is the kind of global mission, the Mankind Project. UK and Ireland, it has a mission around connecting men to life purpose and emotional well-being. And we do that by sort of 2 columns of what we do, really, through our trainings, which is like the NWTA is the central one, and through ongoing peer facilitated men's groups. And it's interesting what you say about kind of, like ABOB and Journeyman and various other organizations and initiatives that have come from MKP men. There's lots of men, I mean, you're one of them. You're out there doing really interesting things. You're an MKP man. I look around our community and I see loads of men doing interesting stuff. And I think that's one of the lovely things for me about the Mankind Project, is there isn't a competitive element in it. I mean, the Mankind Project is the oldest, it's the longest running men-specific personal development program in the world.
Wow.
Like, it's the oldest. But we're not there kind of going, we're the experts in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
More like we try and create ripples in the pond. Like, let's do this. Let's give you some tools. Let's help you in any way that we can. Let's connect you with mission, which is central to what the Mankind Project does, is developing a life mission. And then let's give you the tools to support you so you can go out and make that change in your world. But we're not like some sort of, multinational corporation who's trying to control it all. And that to me is so refreshing, because especially like, kind of heading that up at the moment, it's really nice to not feel I'm in competition with other men that are running men's groups. Like, great, you're running more men's groups, go run them. Let's get all the men in the world we can into men's groups, because it's the fruit that matters, not the tree. And if we start worrying about we own the tree, then we've got caught up in competitiveness, we've got caught up in ownership, we've got caught up in power. We're back into those traps of that masculinity can often fall into.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I'd love you to maybe here at this point to speak a little bit more about men's groups. What's the power of it, you know? And if someone's interested, it's like, well, what does it mean? What's going to happen there, and what am I going to get from it?
It's funny. I mean, we were talking about the. Oh no, we were talking about the BBC interview, but there was another interview I did where guy said like, "Oh, what would I have to do? Like, what would I have to do to be in one of your men's groups? And like, would I have to come and get naked and cry into another man's arms?" And my answer was, you know, like, dude, if you want to do that, if that's going to help you, I'll do that. I'll do that with you. You know what I mean? Like, it don't bother me. But there is this sort of misconception, I think, of what men's groups are. Mm-hmm. That it's men coming together to sort of suffer together. Mm-hmm. And there is an element of sharing and looking at where things ain't working, but it's much more than that. It's just a place of being able to come together to connect with each other, you know, to challenge each other, celebrate with each other, and contribute to each other's lives. I kind of think that men's groups are built up on this idea of the 4 C's, meeting those 4 needs of connection, challenge, contribution, celebration. And I think we do that. I mean, and I think the other element of men's groups is a funny thing I noticed recently, is that if you look at any depiction of hunting parties that were ever drawn on caves around the world, they seem to be a number between 4 and 12. Okay. The amount of men in it. And it's no coincidence to me that the average men group seems to work well at that size. So I think there's something about a man's need to be in a group where communication can be at its optimum level. Because that's the thing also with that number, is that's the best number for communication. If you look at corporate meetings, they've worked out that's the best size. Because we don't get lost in communication, but there's enough so it isn't just didactic. And so you get a breadth of experience, a breadth of communication. So I think it does a few things. I think it fulfills a need to have peers who will actually give you honest feedback and challenge you. And I think it is a healthy men's group. It has to have that element. It can't just be a sharing circle. It has to have something where someone's saying, hang on, I hear this, I'm seeing something else. Like, I'm not buying into your game here. It's something you're actually going to do, or you're just going to talk about it. So yeah, I think it works for all of those elements. Like, it's a place where, if I talk about my men's group, like, I think of it in terms of like, it's where I get healthy fathering in a way. Like, I've got men who will carry me if I need to be carried. Now, I've got men who are going to push me if I need to be pushed. And I've got men that can give me a kick up the arse if I need to kick up the arse. You know, like, it's somewhere where I can go, and the normal games that I can play in my relationships, it don't work. They're left at the door because these men know me so well. And so I think that's really the benefit of what they bring, is support and challenge.
Thank you. I was talking to Rod Boothroyd in the last episode about the warrior energy. And I sometimes see, I did a men's circle for a number of years. There wasn't really the challenge. There was the support, but not the challenge. And I feel it was missing. So we were just playing our old stories.
Yeah.
And when I went off to the Mankind Project weekend, that old men's circle kind of dropped away. And it was like, oh no, that's what I need. I need to be challenged.
Because we were talking about massive generalizations here, but we're talking about masculinity, so we are talking about a huge generalization. But you know, I believe, certainly for me anyway, is that like, I can't have one without the other, because otherwise it's a talking shop. And I can talk myself around the houses all the time. I need a certain amount of that warrior energy. I need a certain amount of, listen, I expect more from you. I expect you to hold yourself to a higher regard, and not in some sort of, you know, macho kind of, you know, you need to be earning more money or any of that sort of stuff, you know, like, but just around the values that I talk about in my life as being important to me. Those men will keep me to those values, will challenge me if I'm not keeping up to those values that I've set for myself. And if I'm not, it's not a challenge like, oh, you're pathetic, you haven't done that. It's how can we help you do it? Like, you say you want it, like, and if you do, then let's find a way. And what do you need? What do we need to get through for you to be able to show up in the world the way you want to show up? And that's why I think, you know, we talked about that thing of the Mankind Project helping develop a mission. That then feeds into the men's groups and that challenge. Are you living your mission? Because if you ain't, what are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and coming kind of back to that idea of competition, I grew up on the terraces of Portsmouth, so Fratton Park and the 657 crew, so a lot of violence. And I found the competition there was, I'm better than you. And it sounds a bit like the streets, what you were saying growing up, is like, we're going to squash anyone else. It wasn't, we're going to bring the other team up. It was all like, we're better. And what I'm hearing, and I've heard this from other teachers saying, actually competition is really healthy if we can go, come on, brother. Yeah. Come on, we can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and we need that. But I think almost in the modern world, we said, oh no, you know, you need to be really supportive, but not challenging.
Yeah. And going back to men's groups, you know, I think men's group kind of, it replaces that need for a pack mentality. You know, I think men do thrive on a pack mentality. It's not that long ago, we were a pack animal and we were hunting in packs. So I think we need that pack. And I think the problem is like what you're talking about, whether it be a gang or whether it be a football group or whether it just be like the guys you go out with on a Friday night after work, your salesman team, whoever it is. When we're in a pack, there is naturally a competitive element in there because I think men enjoy that. We thrive on it, whether it be banter or whatever, you know, like we thrive on it. And we've seen the damage that men can do when they get together in an unhealthy pack. Right? And that's because we can encourage each other to do worse and worse things by increment, you know, like that sort of, you know, the sort of iceberg of misogyny in a way, like just those little the jokes we let slide, the little bit of unhealthy banter that we allow, the little bit of putting down that we think is that we're not comfortable with it, but we kind of allow it. You know, the next time that's the norm, and something else is allowed, and suddenly, before we know it, the behaviour of the pack is out of control, and is really damaging to those in it and around it. You know, whereas I think a men's group, it can replace that feeling of a pack, like, yeah, we're here, we're in it together. But because we have tools and most importantly, an intention to help each other be the best men that we can be, to make positive impacts. And by best, I don't mean nice. By best, I mean making the most positive impact we can on the world for ourselves, our families, our communities, and for everyone else. If we keep that intention at the front of our mind, then using that same increment, we make it better for each other. So I come in and I'm a little bit more vulnerable than I was comfortable being next time. So, well, that man's going to be. He celebrates himself and an achievement that he's made in a way that makes him feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, oh no, am I showing off? And we accept that. And next time I can stand in my glory. You know, we make it better for each other by increment. In the same way, we just create an upward spiral rather than a downward spiral that say a gang produced, and whilst fulfilling that need for connection from other men.
Yeah, thank you, Laurence. So I'd love you to explore a little bit now about this idea of masculinity, because you mentioned you often get asked the question. I listened to the interview on BBC about toxic masculinity. So I'd love you to explore a little bit about what you mean by that, what it is, and the benevolent side and the toxic side.
Yeah. So the toxic masculinity question first. Is that what you like?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the question that gets asked a lot is around toxic masculinity. Like, does toxic masculinity exist? And I think what's happened over time is the meaning of the word has changed. So does toxic masculinity exist? My understanding of toxic masculinity is that it's a model of masculinity. But if men try and fit into it, it does damage to everyone around them and themselves. Right now, if that's the way the term is being used, then I do believe there is a model of masculinity that men try and fit themselves into to be considered men. And I think mercifully that's changing a lot and quickly, but it's definitely existed and it's done damage. And the one thing's for sure, if you look at the statistics, is if a man is doing damage, then people around him suffer, you know, and I think that's been the case. So I think toxic masculinity does exist in that way. I think what it's turned into, though, the question often is, are men toxic? And that's a very different, you know, does toxic masculinity exist is very different than is masculinity toxic? That's a very different question. And my answer to that one is like, no, I don't think masculinity is toxic. I think masculinity can be magnificent. You know, if you're asking the question, are men dangerous? Can men be dangerous? Can men be harmful? Can men negatively affect families and communities? Then the answer is yes, they can. You know, that's definitely the case. But it comes down to not making it something inherent. And I think that goes back to that thing we were talking about, is I think we're a threshold. And I think on a personal level, men are being asked, you know, being asked to show up differently, I think. And also on a wider scale, men are being asked to show up differently. And I think we're at a point of choosing now, you know, and I don't think that's an easy thing to do, because I think there's a lot of wounding that's been done historically that makes it easier for men to hold on to things like power and control and all of those things, that to want them, to thrive on them. And so it's a tough journey, I think, but I think men are, I think, you know, masculinity, I mean, for a start, masculinity and men are very two separate questions. But masculinity, I think, can be a real power for good. I think it has been. You know, there's elements where you look at it where you think it's done magnificent things, and there's areas where it's done a load of damage. And so it's really how we use the tool of masculinity, much more than masculinity being inherently good or bad. It's an energy.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean,
just to pick up on something you talked about, is that sort of idea of benevolent. I really find that word hard. The Bligh word, masculinity. I think that's a lovely idea. But again, I think it's something that we have to consciously move towards, because the reality, I believe, of men and masculinity is that it's a lot to do with resource. So so we have to build a world where we have to build a fairer world for healthy masculinity to exist. Because let's look at it. If it doesn't, say there was some ecological disaster or something now, right? Say we just had a massive power cut in the UK, right, on the island for 3 months.
Yeah.
As soon as resources got finite, your biggest problem is going to be other men. That's a fact. First thing you'd have to do if there was complete collapse, the first thing that would happen is you're going to get a group of guys that you can trust, who you know are handy and capable, and you're going to set up perimeters and start protecting, because your biggest threat is going to be other marauding men looking for resources. That's going to be your biggest threat. And we've seen that in history over and over and over and over again. Something crumbles, the barbarians are at the gate. They come in, they take over, they control the resources, society develops, it goes on and on and on until that society collapses, more barbarians turn up at the gates. That's been our cycle. That's the history of men. That's the bloody history of men. And we're at a point where this, Homo sapien being the wise monkey in a way, right? We've got to engage that wiseness part of us now. And until we're fair, how can we build that? Because if someone's got more and someone's got less, someone's always going to be trying to conquer and take. Someone's always going to try and put people down if power can be held in this way. If wealth can be held in this way, then it's going to be very hard to have a masculinity that is completely positive, because there's always going to be a group that are going, hang on, let's get that. I want that. Let's take it. That's how it would be, sadly. As soon as you get to the stage where you can't buy it anymore, or they don't need what you've got to offer, and you need what they have, the human instinct is, I'm going to kick it down your door and I'm going to take it. When push comes to shove, when survival's involved, that's what's going to happen. And so we're at a threshold now, where, and this is why I think it's a really exciting time, where we understand those dynamics now. We understand, we can look back at history and see how these things have happened and how they don't really benefit us. And we have to consciously look at every aspect. And how do we just make this fairer for everyone? How do we just make this a better place for everyone? And that's why I think every issue, whether it be civil rights, whether it be equality, whether it be trans rights, whatever it is, those things are issues that men have to get behind and support. Because fairness and freedom for everyone is the only way we're going to create a world where we don't have to try and worry. We can trust that we're going to be okay, because someone isn't going to come and invade us. And it's one of the big steps I think we have to get through as men, in terms of things like equality, is that more for everyone else doesn't mean less for me. And that's a real old paradigm that we're somehow holding on to. I think I see a lot of people holding on to it. But if everyone has all this equality, what are we going to have? That's part of the initiation, my brother, is you're going to have to give up some of that. If you want a world where you can trust that you're going to be okay, and it isn't a jostling for hierarchy, you might just have to trust that there's enough for everyone. If we just let go of some that we have. So I think, and I think we're central to that. I think men are central to building that picture and model of a better world.
Thank you, Laurence. Have you ever read the book Humankind by Rutger Bregman?
No.
Last year. Human, what's it called? Hopeful History. Really beautiful, really
Wow,
beautiful.
check it out.
I read it during lockdown, kind of summer last year. Yeah, and it's very inspiring, actually. Very inspiring about how hopeful, often stories we've been told about the past, about what our ancestors were like. He's actually sharing, well, there's new evidence to show actually there was a lot of peace, like you say, a lot of brotherhood, a lot of people working well together. And so yeah, I really recommend reading that. But thank you,
Yeah,
thank you for
we
thanking
seem to
that.
go through models of like, conflict, peace, collaboration, and then decline. And then whenever there's a decline, it's like conflict comes again. It's almost like there's a reset button. It seems like if you look at history, it's like it sort of goes, and then every now and again there's chaos, and then there's a reset. And the reset seems to be quite bloody initially. People come in and they take over, and then reset a new order in the chaos. And what I think is interesting about that is, let's do it differently. Like, if we know that, let's do it differently this time. So if there is chaos, if that does come, rather than me going, right, I better get down to the Decathlon and get myself a tent and the biggest knife I can get because I'm in trouble, we go, right, let's reach out to each other and make sure that everyone's got what everyone's needs. Let's make sure everyone's okay. Is everyone okay? Yeah. And let's use that energy that we seem to have for organization and for endurance and all of that sort of stuff. Let's use that in a beneficial way. Let's use it to stop the marauders rather than go, I'm a marauder.
And yeah, thank you. And one of the questions I kind of comes to me is, often when we go into that mission because of something like an ecological, in my town, Hebden Bridge, there was a flood a number of years ago, and the whole of the centre of town flooded. It was Christmas, Boxing Day. The next day, the 27th, the flood's gone down, but the town was covered in mud. All the shops had been ruined. There was about 4,000 or 5,000 people turned up, and they started clearing the streets. And the newspaper said to the local politicians, "Oh, well done for organising this." And they were like, "No, didn't organise anything." Where have they come from? And it's like the goodness of people. It's like, right, there's a challenge. And I almost feel nowadays we've got that comfort when there's the challenge there of right, or a mission or a purpose. Everyone just came out. They cleaned the streets. It was beautiful. People walking the streets, giving soup, cooking food. People came all the way out from London. They'd cook food in the Sikh temples, brought it up to feed people. It was just so heartfelt.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
and yeah. These are the constant, these are the constant choices that we get to make. For myself, I believe that constantly I have the choice in every situation of, am I going to bring the poison to this situation, or am I going to bring the medicine to this situation? Like, can I do something beneficial here, or am I just going to grab what I can and do what I can? And I have to hold those things in the front of my mind, because I'm capable of both. I'm very capable of being the poison in the situation. So if I take my eye off the ball, if I'm not conscious, and if I'm not holding my values first, then I can maraud. I can maraud with the best of them.
Me too.
but it's like, what am I? Am I a marauder, or am I a protector? Am I something that benefits others? Do I want to be a gift to the world, or am I just going to suck as many resources as I can before I shuffle off?
Thank you. Beautiful. Wasn't expecting our conversation to go this way, but thank you. So
feel free to pull it back to where you want it.
No, I think this is what I love about conversations, because I have no idea on one level where things will go. I mean, kind of brings me back to reading through your website. You talk about, there's a quote on there which you say, the only real currency left is community. And I guess we've been talking about this quite a bit, but I'd love you to just explore what you mean by that, yeah.
I mean, you sort of have to look at, I mean, I really sort of don't want to go off on a tangent, but like, you've got to look at currency, you've got to look at money and what that did to us. So before that, you know, and I'm not one of these people that buys into the idea of like, we were all peaceful in the past, you know, we lived in with the land. If you look at the history of Homo sapiens, like pretty much wherever we go, we killed bunches of other people and made a load of animals extinct. We've pretty much done that since the birth of Homo sapiens. So it's by far from a perfect scenario. But like in those times, our survival was much more based on investment in community, even if they were quite small communities. There was an investment in it that was needed, because if I killed a big animal, right, the most sensible thing for me to do in terms of my survival was to come around to your house and give you some, because it was going to go off, right? It was going to go off. Couldn't store it, so I had this resource. I couldn't store it, so I stored it in you, in terms of community, in terms of goodwill. So I would give you it, and I'd go and give it to other people. I'd go and give it to other significant people in that community who had half a chance of reciprocating. So I'd give it to them, because then I know, well, they've got it now, right? They've got it now. I ain't got it. They're going to give it to me. You know, no gift given freely, and that's kind of how community kind of survived. Like, I'm invested in you. It's like that scene at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. It's like my money is in your house, your money is in my house. That's sort of how it was. That was the sensible way to survive, was to be invested in others and have a sense of community, because that's what was going to look after you if you got sick. If you know, being popular, you know, the idea of like the psychopathic man who controlled everyone, that's a myth. That couldn't have existed, because he'd have just got clubbed to death. Everyone should have clubbed that guy to death. He's a pain in the ass.
You should definitely read, because they talk about that.
You'd have to be personable and kind of, you know, like effective and useful and invested in others to have survived, because that's what we needed. You know, it made sense to do things that way. Then money comes, then currency comes, and currency then makes you able to store wealth. And when you can store wealth, then there's a very different scenario comes to mind, because you can store it. Not only can you then store it so you can have more than you need, which you can then pass on to your family and family and family. You can build and build and build and build more. You also need to protect. So suddenly strength comes in much more than collaboration. Strength comes in, might. And so currency, money, is a game changer in terms of how we related to each other. And also, you know, and changed masculinity in many ways, because suddenly it was like the ones who could protect things were valuable to you. You can protect my wealth, and I can buy your allegiance. I don't have to earn it anymore by a sense of investment in each other, right? So we come to a stage now where I think a lot of that stuff is, I do think capitalism is going for a radical upheaval at the moment in one way or another, and you know, I think there's going to be a limitation of resources soon. I think we're seeing that. And I think with things like cryptocurrencies, we're starting to see that the myth of money is not as true as we thought it was. It's not an inherent truth that we believe it always was. And if we are seeing a change socially, which I really hope we are, I believe we're seeing a change. I just hope we see a good change, right? We're in a change without doubt. And if we're moving towards a good one, then I think the currency that we have to have is community. We have to go back to, I'm invested in you, you're invested in me. You know, coming back to that thing of other people's rights. Like, I'm going to be an ally for you to get what you need, right? Because freedom for you means more freedom for me.
Yeah.
That's the bit I think people don't get. Safety for you means more safety for me, because I live with you and you live with me. If you're damaged and angry, I'm in danger. Right? We've got to get past this idea of us and them in as many ways as we can. Like, because what happens really, and I'm going to go, you know, I'm often in danger of sounding like a hippie, which is really weird for me, because I was always a young skateboard punk, and it's really weird for me. But like, we've got to get to this thing of like, we're humans on this planet for a really, really short period of time. 80 goes around the sun, if you're lucky. I mean, I'm 47 now. It's going fast. I'm getting a sense of how short and brief this gift of life is. And we've got to get to a stage where we enjoy that together, surely. Surely, because it's such a brief period. Let's just get together and love each other for a while and have a great time, and then die. Right? Let's try and help each other where we can, and not fuck each other up where we can. Just a simple mind shift of, I'm going to be the medicine here, not the poison in this life. If I can make it better for you, I will. Play my part in that. That's the real currency that's left. And I think what we're seeing now is the good side of things like social media and more communication is we get to see who's showing up and who isn't showing up. And so I think, you know, the days of just men hoarding a load of power and keeping everyone else away, I think it's going to break down, because I think we're starting to see through it and going, you know what, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. You're not going to get away with that. So let's build communities.
So what would you say, because you've obviously had experience of building communities, for someone who's listening to this, what can they start doing to start building a community or cultivating that?
It's like, I'm a real strong believer in like, keep your side of the road clean first. So it starts with me. Like, I've got to build community with me first. So I've got to know who I am, what I'm about, what my values are, what's important to me, how I want to show up in the world. Right? I've got to build a bit of community with me, and then I have to ripple that out. Like, it's no good me thinking this and me volunteering here, but I'm an asshole in the house. Like, I've got to build that to be a healthy, thriving place. You know, I've got to be a good partner. You know, and I use the good not in terms of good. I use the good in effective. Give people what they need, taking what I need, communicating clearly. I've got to be the same in my relationship to my son. I've got to show up as a father to him. Right? I've got to teach him about, I've got to be a role model to him. I've got to model it all the way through it. It's got to be aligned. And then outside in my circle. So when I'm around other men, I've got to show up in a way that I think is in terms of my values, not letting those little things slide, not allowing those behaviors that are going to be negative, you know, not making those things okay. And then also how I treat people. I've got to treat people fairly. I've got to treat people with respect. I've got to show people that I love them. I have to build community. And that can be, and it ripples out. So literally, like, if you're listening to it, like, go and speak to your neighbors. I mean, just go and talk to your neighbors and say hi. Like, there's a lovely thing. I'm from the East End of London, and I've been looking at some of the old traditions. And there's this tradition. I mean, it's not specific to there, but it seems like it may have started there, which is this thing of like moving into a new house and going, I'm going to nip round and borrow some sugar off the neighbour. I think first, there was this tradition in the East End. When you moved into a house, you went to the next door neighbours and you said, I've just moved in next door. Can I borrow a cup of sugar off you? Right? And where that comes from, you would do it even if you had sugar.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Where it comes from is sugar was valuable. It was
Mm.
it was a valuable resource. And in a poor community, it was a very valuable resource.
Mm.
But what it was saying, I'm going to borrow something off you because that makes it okay when you need to borrow something off me.
Mm. Mm.
It was a way of saying, I'm your neighbor. It was just a way of saying, I'm your neighbor. If you need anything, come to me. And I'm going to make it okay. I'm not going to make myself seem powerful by saying, if there's anything you need, I've got it. It was by showing vulnerability. And I need something from you. Is that okay? And that gave permission. And so I think it's about that. It's about get to know the people, like build the community you want, like actively go and do it in your local community. Go out and see, ask for what you need and try and get help with that and extend that help to others. Just be invested in each other. We can do that. You know, that's something that's within our power to do. And it makes a significant difference in practical terms.
Thank you. Yeah. It's really useful. That importance of starting with the self and then stepping out and volunteering or doing or connecting to people. So I realize we're coming up to, probably got another 5-10 minutes now. It's coming up to the hour.
Okay.
I would love for you to speak, I think a little bit about maybe Robert Bligh. Robert Bligh, someone I've kind of really loved over the years. And someone said to me recently, that because of his work, that's where the men's movement really stemmed from. He died 10 days ago. So I'd love for you maybe to share maybe a little story or some teachings or something from Robert or about him.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the anecdote of Moore, and just in case people listening to this who don't know Moore, Robert Moore was a mythopoetic poet. He actually knew the beats very well. I've got some quite early rare books of his where he was with Ginsberg and Burroughs and those guys.
You say, sorry, Robert Moore or Robert Bligh?
Robert Bligh, sorry. Got me mythopoetics mixed up. And then, of course, he wrote Iron John. And Iron John is one of the books that directly inspired the Mankind Project to start. It was originally called The Wild Man Weekend. And then it moved away from that slightly. But so he's definitely one of the forefathers of the mythopoetic movement. Along with Joseph Campbell and guys like that. But one of the anecdotes I like is a man that me and you both know well, who, in the early days of all that, worked quite a lot with Robert Bligh. And he told me this story, which I love, about when men would turn up to a workshop, one of his workshops or whatever, and they were very like hyper spiritual, like hyper conscious men. And apparently he would say, this guy needs the mud and the blood. And then I saw a lecture of him where he put some of that into context, where he was saying, as men, we need one hand in the spirit, one hand in the greater good, but one hand in the mud and the blood. And for me, when I heard that, it had a profound effect on me, because it's about that balance we need. Like, yes, we are conscious spiritual beings. We have to think about greater good, sacrifice, longevity, all that stuff. And we're here right now as human beings right now that shit, bleed, and get dirty. And that balance of one hand in the sky and one hand in the dirt, I think, is really important. And looking into it more, it's even where the idea of like the crown comes from. Like, I'm connected to the sky and I'm connected to the earth. And that's had a significant effect. That just that simple statement I was like, yeah, I can be thinking all these things. Yes, I'm a thinking being. I can have all these great thoughts. It comes back to what we were saying before. I can have all these great thoughts about how the world can be better. But if my next door neighbor is sitting there and she ain't got enough food in her house, then I'm a liar. I'm a liar, because I'm not even keeping the person in, I'm not even making a benefit to the person in the next house to mine, 6 inches of bricks away. So you've got, that balance is important to me. I've got to actually do the work rather than think about the work. I've got to make the difference. I've got to bring the medicine if I can.
It's like, I think certain traditions, and certainly in martial arts, I say about the importance of grounding. It's all, often we go into a martial arts class, we're very in our heads, but we get pushed over very easily. We've got to ground, come back into our bodies, and kind of the grounding, rather than being just up in the sky, actually having our hands on the earth. So
if you're running around going, how do I make the world a better place? The world needs to be a better place. The world needs to be a better place. Well, and you're not sitting there sometimes going, wow, isn't it weird how we treat monkeys? Right? Like if we're not taking the moments to think about what we're actually doing rather than how it's going to be, then it can't work. We have to have one, we've got to have that balance of now and then, of here, right now, on earth now, what can I do today? What needs to change? How do I deal with the suffering that I'm feeling? How do I get on with my life? How do my family have what they need? Am I servicing them? If I'm just thinking about the lofty ideals, I'm not in balance. And I mention monkeys because I'm just obsessed with how we treat primates at the moment. It's really got my attention. Like, they're our closest ancestors in terms of animals, and we treat them the way we treat them. And yet whenever I see them, it's like, wow, they are us. You know what I mean? There's a symbolic thing there about us not connecting with our animal form enough.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurence. So I would love for you just to maybe share maybe how people get in touch with you, how people learn more about the Mankind Project. I mean, obviously in the description, I'll put it in links to the MKP UK and Ireland, and any other resources. But yeah, anything you'd like to.
I mean, I'm across all social media as Laurence H. Johns, and it's Laurence with you. So I'm across all social media in that way. And yeah, if you go to the Mankind Project website, put an email there, it will come to me.
Okay.
So that's the best way to get in contact, really.
Okay.
And all the stuff about the Mankind Project is on there. And if you want to, a really good way of seeing what the Mankind Project does is to come to one of our online connection groups. We run them 4 times a week. We also have a specific one for Ireland, for the men of Ireland, the men who feel connected to Ireland. And we also, I'm proud to say, also had our first one last Monday for non-heterosexual, non-cisgendered men. Okay. And they're free, they're online. If you go to the Mankind Project UKI.org website, you can sign up to them there. And it's a really good way of just getting a sense of what men's groups might be like.
Thank you. So I'm also aware, some of my audience also live globally. Is it just the mankindproject.com? Is that take people to kind of the US, or how would they find out if they're not based in
mankindproject.org is the kind of mother site, really, that kind of gives you information about the global brotherhood. So you can find out about what the Mankind Project is doing in your local area by going there.
Okay, great. And then finally, for women, is there like a feminine version of a female version of the Mankind Project?
Yeah, there's two. So there's three really interesting organisations actually. There's Women in Power.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's Women Within. And Women Within was actually started by one of the founders of Mankind Project's wife. So it's kind of very much a sister organisation to ours. And they very different energies to what they do, but they are specifically for women. And then there's one called Celebration of Being. And that's another interesting organisation because they run men's weekends staffed by women.
Okay, yeah.
And vice versa. So it's around men who want to connect with the feminine in a different way and women who want to connect with the masculine in a different way. So they're doing some very interesting stuff.
Thank you. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Laurence. Any final words you want to share with people listening today?
Just, the one thing I like to end everything by saying is just, if you're a man, give a men's group a try. Some way. Find one, get involved, just see what you think. I think you may be surprised.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Please do click on the links below to visit Mankind Project UK and Ireland to find out more, or some of the other links. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Laurence.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.